I have interviewed you before. I always ask you how you are before every interview. But this time, I mean, it takes on a whole new meaning in light of everything that has happened over the past week. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I talked about what's been going on Monday Night Raw a couple of weeks ago. I was very happy to be able to, speak to the world and let them know that one, I got lucky in the sense that I was asymptomatic from COVID. I didn't get all the horrible side effects that some of my family and friends, people across the world, have been affected with. But that's not the thing I'm most grateful for. The thing I'm most grateful for is WWE's testing policy. Throughout the whole pandemic, we've constantly been evolving with the times, upping our testing, and we caught, my positive diagnosis before I was able to go to work, pass it to one of my colleagues, and may have passed it to one of their high-risk family members. So I'm very grateful that we're able to catch it, and I was able to give the message as well that, listen, I've been doing everything you can possibly do. I've been wearing my mask, I've been social distancing, and I still got it. If it can happen to me, it can literally happen to anyone. I wanted to let everyone know, let's just keep following all the guidelines that are out there right now. Let's do what we can, because it's the only way we're going to get rid of this thing. But I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Great to know that. And I'm really excited to see what's next for you. Let me be honest, growing up, I was a Nitro fan, and Goldberg was one of my favorites. Were you a Nitro fan as well? Were you a Goldberg fan? And what is it like working with him right now?
Yeah, I was a wrestling fan in general. Like, WWE was my favorite show. And I got a little older. My brother and I really liked ECW, but we also watched WCW all the time and recorded it all the time. And we'd watch the full episode after WWE. But when Goldberg, was on his run, the undefeated streak prior to beating Hulk Hogan for the WCW Championship, we used to flick back and forth between WWE and WCW, just trying to find that 2-minute Goldberg match. And that means you have to flick back and forth every 2 minutes because his matches were so quick and so dominant. If you wanted to catch it, you had to keep changing the channel all the time. And I remember being so young and trying to see that match, and my brother and I getting so excited to see Goldberg run somebody down. And I remember making myself up in the video games, create a character and then fighting all my favorites in the games and fighting Goldberg. And then you fast forward 20 plus years later, and suddenly I'm WWE champion in real life. I'm actually in the video game as real Drew, and I'm fighting real Goldberg. It's a pretty surreal situation as a lifelong fan, and to be in the in the ring at Royal Rumble as WWE champion, fighting the actual Goldberg. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around things, and no matter what anyone might think or what anyone might say about Goldberg's age, look at what's happened every time he's returned to the company. He keeps himself in shape. He's an animal. He's explosive. He ran through Brock Lesnar, won the Universal Championship. He ran through The Fiend and won the Universal Championship. He's on a new streak where he comes back to the company and he wins the title. So I'm looking to end that new streak he's on right now. He comes back. He can fight me at the Rumble. I've got all the respect in the world for him. And it hurts me to say, but Goldberg, I'm going to have to kick your head off and beat you because you ain't winning my title. I'm ending the streak.
So when you used to play against Goldberg, who did you play as in the Nitro video game?
Who did I play? Those were the Nintendo 64 games were my favorite ones. What was the Revenge? Was it called?
I think it was called Nitro. Okay.
I remember Nitro, but I remember my favorite one was WCW NWO Revenge, I think, for the Nintendo 64. Okay. That was the coolest game ever. And I remember it was the first time I ever saw blood in a game. It was crazy. But who would I go back then? Honestly, I think I would usually go Goldberg more than anybody else. Who else would I be? I was a big fan of Sting, a huge fan of. I think the Giant was in that game. I remember going to him, Big Show, when he was originally the Giant. And oh my goodness, my brother and I would play that game forever. It's actually in the locker room, right now where I'm sitting. The guys have got it set up. I think Xavier Woods brought a Nintendo 64 in, and it's actually in there right now. So I think I'm going to have to get back into it and remind myself of all the characters because I used to have so much fun with it when I was a kid.
Fantastic, man. And speaking of old school wrestling, what was it like sharing screen space with Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart?
Crazy. Surreal. My dad texted me afterwards. He also posted on Facebook a picture of me and Hogan doing the speech what are you going to do, brother? When Drew McIntyre and Hulk Hogan run wild on you and we're doing the speech together, like he sent me a message saying, like, you remember watching WrestleMania 7 with your brother as like 7-year-old, 6-year-old, and Hogan like being the man back then, and suddenly you're doing a shtick with him. And I try to play cool, like, yeah, Dad, that's just because I'm WWE champion now. Hogan wants to hang out with me. But realistically, inside as a wrestling fan, I'm screaming, and it's just absolutely incredible that I get these cool opportunities, like performing Hulk Hogan shtick with Hulk Hogan.
Fantastic, man. Now a lot of our readers wanted to know that the Undertaker was on the Joe Rogan Experience some time ago, and he called the current product soft. As the representative of WWE, the WWE champion, how do you respond to that?
I don't agree whatsoever, especially from an in-ring perspective. I'm not sure. I listened to part of it. I've got to listen to the whole thing because it's pretty new. But I think he may have been referring to like the kind of storylines and characters, etc.
Right.
Like the co-host that was on the show was like a fan from the Attitude Era, and I think they were perhaps referring to some of the outlandish storylines back in the day that were more sexual based, more like risque, 18 plus. Our current product is PG. There's only so far we can push it, and we're willing to push it. There's certain things from back in the day that was awesome, and certain things that were not awesome that I wouldn't want to go back to. So I'm not sure if it was more from like that perspective when it comes to the stories and not being as adult based as it used to be. But I think we're walking a good line right now. But when it comes to the in-ring game, that's just not true at all. It's never been more physical. The in-ring talent right now, we've got the best in-ring roster of all time. If you look at our talent from top to bottom, what they can do in the ring, what they can pull off from a storytelling perspective in the ring and a physical perspective especially, there's nobody better. You look at back at the Attitude Era, you compare the matches, turn the volume off and watch the match quality and compare it to now. There's no comparison. And then the Ruthless Aggression era is when things really stepped up in ring-wise. But now there's no roster like ours in the world. We're physical, we're hard-hitting, we've got athletes that can do things that are just absolutely mind-blowing. So it certainly wasn't the in-ring part we was talking about. I know firsthand because I'm the one hitting most of the people and they're asking me to stop hitting them so hard.